I've had a passion for art and design my whole life, ever since I was a little kid. When I moved to Washington State back in the 80s, I got my first job was at a printing company. About 11 years ago, my good buddy Tom Llewellyn and I had a band together. The band was called Wallpaper Pie. He being a writer and me being a designer, we stumbled on this idea of doing letterpress, and I had a lot of interest in it. So 10 years ago, we started a project called Beautiful Angle. Basically, it's a guerrilla arts project that once a month we produce posters that are printed via letterpress using old wood type or lead type and old engravings and new cuts that we might do. We wanted to do something that was really sustainable month in and month out. So every month we produce about 120 posters, and we hang them on a regular route through downtown Tacoma. And sometimes we'll have guest artists or writers join with us. We're not afraid of any subject in these posters, so we'll talk everything from our feelings about pizza to God and politics and the whole gamut. It seems like it frees up people to join in the conversation without a sense of polarization, you know.
I started doing graphic design because when I was a little kid I collected comic books, and I started buying records, and I started collecting old rock posters when I was a kid, and that became what I wanted to do. It's what I've always wanted to do. I started off trying to be a corporate graphic designer. I wore a suit and tie, I went to meetings with bankers, scared the poop out of them for some reason. I don't know why, you know. So I ended up just freelancing, just working for anybody I would, and I drifted towards the areas I was interested in, which is the arts. Did a lot of work for theater groups and arts groups, and of course my friends in rock bands. As that scene progressed in the Northwest, I was behind the scenes doing design and helping conceptualize things constantly. When the Seattle rock scene came along, I basically worked for my friends, and that's where I really started to gain a lot of international recognition. Seattle in the late 70s, graphic design was all beautiful calligraphy and rainbows and earth tones. And then I'm coming along with bright day-glow colors and actual images that look like they were left on the bottom of the ocean too long, you know. Everything I did looked like it came out of a garbage can. Very little of my work looks nice. I don't do pretty very well. That isn't me, you know. I have a very hard time doing anything other than disturbing, shocking. My stuff is crappy looking, and yet people are drawn to it.
So this is one of Art Chantry's most famous posters, and I actually was talking to him about it and said I'd love to get a copy of that poster, and so he went and looked at his files and stuff and emailed me back a few days later and said, well, I have one. The corner's kind of bent on it, but if you want it, you can have it. It's the one that hung in the Museum of Modern Art show at PS2 show that I had. But if you're interested in it, even though it's damaged, you can have it. And I'm like, yeah, I'd love to have that. And so he gave that to me. I just love it. Yeah, it's a great piece. Hey, tell me about the Macbeth poster that you gave me in the house.
Yeah, Macbeth.
And
yeah.
Tell me about that image again. It was like your great uncle or something?
It was my grandfather.
Grandfather, okay.
We had this photograph of my grandfather, and some damage had happened to it. Something had spilled on it and had kind of burned it, like acid had dropped on this photograph. So there was this big burn area with some drops, and I'd always been fascinated by the condition of this photograph. So this particular theater company, the Bathhouse Theater, was famous for taking Shakespeare plays and setting them into different eras. So I just thought of this period photograph of my grandfather from that era, and I just basically filled in the area that had gotten burned out by the acid drip with red ink, and that became blood. And it said everything you needed to say.
So do you think that the old ephemera and stuff that gets reimagined into your work becomes fine art?
No, because I don't really see what we do as fine art.
You've had work in the Louvre or whatever, you know.
Just because it hangs in an art museum doesn't mean it's art. You know, just because a chair gets into a museum doesn't mean that the guy who made the chair is an artist.
Yeah.
He made a chair, you know.
Yeah.
I make advertising artifacts. I make things that actually have function. It's not my muse, it's my client's muse that I'm working with. I am working with other people ideas for hire. That is not the function of an artist as we popularly define it these days. So, I mean, just because we make images and we make objects that you can look at aesthetically, doesn't mean it's art.
One of the things I think about, and especially because of Tacoma, is that the artisan movement, you know, it's practical artists or artisans making art. And it's not just abstract expressionism for the sake of hanging in a pristine white gallery. It has practicality behind it, even if it's not practical in its finished result.
And it's so Tacoma.
Yeah.
I mean, Tacoma is such a working town. It's a working class town. It's a blue collar town. Has the highest union population of any city in the entire state. I mean, people have lower standard of living. You know, this is a rough and tumble town where the common man lives and prospers. And out of that dialogue, the language, the visual language of Joe Average Public, the popular dialogue, is where graphic design comes from. Mm-hmm. It makes this a very rich town. I mean, 10, 20 years ago, you do letterpress work. 10, 20 years ago, that was just a trash printing process that was becoming outmoded and was literally being thrown into landfills. And in the last 10, 20 years, people have started pulling it literally out of the landfills and using it in a new way. They just thought that the images that you could produce on a letterpress, all that movable type and all the textural qualities, was beautiful. And they started producing what is essentially art pieces with stuff that was never meant to produce art.
Yeah.
So that is basically the nature of this city, and I think what we do fits very beautifully into this city. And that's one of the things I really enjoy about living here again, is that it's just, everywhere you go, there's just raw materials to look at, to just think about.
We both kind of work with similar limitations, a lot of times at least. You work with found objects and collage and, you know,
and low budgets.
Yeah,
low budgets.
And in letterpress, you have that same kind of constriction or limitations where you have a collection of old engravings, and these are your assets you have to work with. How does that work for you? What do you do to kind of process your assets in order to come up with a great idea?
Yeah, that is a good question. To begin with, over the years, like you, I collected assets. Mm-hmm. I collect crap. I've got a studio that's full to the ceiling with like clip art from the 40s and books and records and just stuff I found that I think is interesting graphically. And maybe or maybe not, any of that stuff could become part of my work, because I really do a collage kind of approach, a montage. Mm-hmm. I really see what graphic design as doing is an assemblage medium. It's not like we sit down and draw every piece of type, or we set copy, or we do everything. We don't take all the photographs, we don't draw all the pictures, we don't create each little piece of type. You know, we hire people to do that. We don't usually print them. We hire somebody to do that. So what a designer starts becoming is more like a conductor of an orchestra of all these other talents. A contractor even would be a way to look at it. But you're still in charge of the way it's supposed to turn out. So you end up working with all these disparate pieces taken from all over the place and used it to create the vision you're trying, the image, the idea that you're trying to get across.
And you've had huge experiences in your life, so you have a lot to kind of filter.
Yeah. It's like when you've been around a long time and you end up meeting a lot of people and doing a lot of things, you have a history. Mm-hmm. I love having a history. You know, when I first left Tacoma, I didn't have much of a history. Now I've got a great history, and I'm really, really happy with having that to draw from. All of a sudden, when I I draw off something that's a lot more personal experience because I actually met that person whose idea inspired me. You know? That's good.